doing it without an expert is kind of risky in my opinion. I mean, I rely on people who are good at what they do for everything. That's one of the best things about being in networking so long.
Yeah.
I have a guy or a girl for everything. I don't ask about the price. I don't expect it to be the cheapest price. I expect it to be fair, and I expect them to do a good job. So I think that's all people can really ask for with insurance too.
Hello and welcome. I am your host, Tato Datsun of 23 Journeys, a network for creatives. I'm joined by my co-host, Naomi. How are you?
Good. We are back here again.
Awesome. And today is our Creative Connectors Corner. We are going to be spending some time talking with a non-creative, but they can definitely help your business grow. I'd like to introduce my good friend. He is a fantastic commercial insurance agent. Well, actually, broker. I'm sorry about that. Don.
That's all good.
Mr. Don Blizzard.
Thanks, Tato. It's great to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you here. I wanted to bring you on because it's very important during this part of our show, talking about the people that creatives should network with, and one person that I think is crucial for all creatives to connect with is an insurance person. Can you give a little background on your history and, company and everything?
Yeah, sure. So I'm old enough I've been doing it for over 20 years now. Like most insurance people, I started out doing a lot of personal insurance, home and auto, transitioned to commercial insurance exclusively right around 2019. And I typically work with businesses with employees just because, like you said, insurance is something that everybody needs. But the businesses with employees are, the types of businesses that know they need it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for sharing that information with us, Don. So one of the things, we talk about we're with creatives and everything. So with insurance, a lot of people usually are just like, oh, I'll cover my house, my car and stuff. But people don't understand that when it comes to commercial insurance, there are a lot of other things that are more specific and tailored. Could you give some ideas for what are different insurance things that a creative would use?
Yeah, so I'll use a photographer or videographer. Obviously, that's a good example. So your equipment, all this equipment in here, all this equipment that you see when you go to weddings or everything that you're using to do your job costs a lot of money, I'd imagine. So you want to make sure that you're insuring that both when it's here or when it's in transit with you through an inland marine policy. Depending on if you have employees, you do workman's compensation. It just depends. Creatives is a pretty broad category, and depending on what you're doing and where you're doing it, there's a lot of different insurance products, but it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. And a lot of people just think like the first time that people tend to think about it is when they go to do a job and they're asked to provide a certificate of insurance. They don't even really know what it is. So that's kind of what gets people's wheels turning about, I need the certificate of insurance, and, you go from there.
That actually happened to me. It was my first big commercial photography job. I was photographing an apartment complex, and the client was just like, all right, cool. All right, everything's good to go. We just need a copy of your certificate of insurance. And I was like, oh, I literally just went online, found some company that did insurance and stuff. Now, what's the difference for someone to just go online, find a company, maybe, I'm not going to use any big names, but like find like this one of those online brokers, but versus finding a person like you?
So I'll back up one step. The certificate of insurance, what a lot of people still don't realize is that the certificate is meant to make sure that the person that's contracting you is protected. So the certificate just says that if Tato comes here and does this work and something goes wrong, I will not get sued. He will get sued. So the certificate is to protect who you're working for, not so the certificate is just like a little snapshot of your insurance the day that it's requested, in other words. Yeah. Online, you would go, I've never done it, but I would imagine you went on there and you click the drop-down box. I'm a photographer. I'm a videographer. Click this, boom, pay, you're done.
Yeah.
I tell people this all the time. I do a lot of contractors, so I say, I couldn't build a house if my life depended on it. Do you think that you could do a good job doing your own insurance online?
No,
I
absolutely
mean,
not.
that's pretty much what it is. There's a lot of intricacies with it. And one of the reasons why a lot of people get frustrated with insurance and some people hate it is because they did it online or they did it with somebody. And for whatever reason, they paid money for insurance. And then when they needed the insurance, the claim didn't get covered.
Yeah.
So if you're working with a broker or any agent that knows what they're doing and you tell them exactly what you're doing, you make sure that the operations are covered. And a lot of people aren't able to do that on their own, especially when they do it online.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, obviously a person can pick up a camera, maybe take a photo, but is it really like a high quality photo? Someone can grab a keyboard, they can hit a couple keys, but does that make them a musician? And like you said, you could look online, maybe like, oh, this looks okay, but that doesn't really mean you know what you're talking
The
about with the insurance.
do-it-yourself home repair has such a negative connotation. I mean, the do-it-yourself anything, you're not going to get professional quality.
Yeah.
The whole point of insurance is to transfer risk to avoid a big financial loss. It's the whole thought process of doing it online to save a few bucks is kind of crazy to me, but I'm an insurance guy. I can understand, I guess, why some people don't think that way.
Fair enough. So you actually got to you hit on one of our questions about some people who underestimate the importance of insurance.
Yeah. So my best customers are typically two types of people. One, people that I talked to in the past and told them what I would recommend and how I would recommend doing their insurance. They got other advice, did it that way, and it didn't work out. And then they come back. That's probably the best type of client I have because unfortunately they saw the value in the advice that I provided them and learned the hard way. And then there's people that just worked online or worked with somebody else. And it always comes down to, it's almost like the whole, you have to touch the stove to believe it's hot. So people that have had a bad experience with insurance tend to end up being my best customers because they're more willing to listen and they understand the true value of insurance. It's hard to understand value if you don't see it work. I always say I sell 250-page binders that I know 99.9% of people never read. And some of these binders in their mind, they're getting a certificate when they need it, but they're paying a lot of money for this insurance. Some of these like just small contracting companies, they're paying a lot of money.
Yeah.
So if they don't see an immediate tangible value, it's just really hard for them to wrap their brain around it.
Yeah. So then speaking about, we're going to go back to photographers and videographers. Like we said, expensive equipment is part of what we use and everything. What type of coverage do we need to protect us against theft, damage, loss, traveling? What do you recommend?
So you want to make sure that you have coverage for your business, personal property, the business, the stuff that you use to do your job. So you want to have business, personal property, and then the inland marine, it's kind of like a personal articles floater for personal insurance. It's basically the stuff that you bring to and from jobs. It's covered while it's in transit and while you're using it. The general liability that you have to carry. General liability covers two things. For the most part, it's third-party bodily injury, third-party property damage. So if someone like you walks into a wedding, sets up their stuff, and then somebody trips over a wire, that's third-party property. That's third-party bodily injury, excuse me. If you're setting up something and let's say you poke some of your equipment into a wall and it damages a wall, that's a third-party property damage claim. So that's more meant to protect you to have to pay that kind of stuff out of pocket. Also the venue. The stuff that the line of coverage that I guess would be valuable for you is the professional. I mean, people are hiring you for a professional service.
Yeah.
So that's where professional liability comes into play. If somebody hires you to do a headshot and the headshot is the reason why they're getting turned down for 10 different jobs, not that would ever happen if they hired you, but that's the kind of thing. It's kind of like an accountant or a doctor. You go to them for their expertise and their advice. And if you performing your job ends up in a financial loss for somebody else, that's where the professional, or otherwise, a lot of people call it errors and omissions. Same thing.
Errors and omissions.
Yeah.
So like the professional insurance, that's like kind of like if they didn't like my style kind of protection, or is it more of like if I make a mistake?
If you make a mistake, yeah. So like let's say you do wedding photos or something like that, and the photos just came out terrible, or like it's just it. Here's the thing too with insurance. that's kind of like an objective thing. You might think the photos look great. They might think they look terrible. You can't really control who sues you or what they're suing you for. The thing with insurance is you want to make sure that the things that you could be sued for are disclosed to the insurance company so that if it does happen, even if you did nothing wrong, you still have legal defense. And it's not just the legal defense, the money, it's the time. You want to keep running your business and let the insurance company defend the claim. So that's kind of where it comes in. And I've been doing it long enough to know that people will sue you for all kinds of things that really aren't your fault or that were out of your control. You want to make sure that the insurance covers that part of it and you go on about running your business.
Oh, those are great points. I mean, Naomi, you're
Talking about out of control and stuff like that, because a lot of people don't think too, because it's like we talked about the equipment, like if somebody trips and falls or something gets damaged, but also too, like for instance, if you have to travel to a job somewhere and then you get in an accident, now you couldn't make it to that job, now they didn't have a DJ for that event or they didn't have a photographer for that event. Like what kind of it? I know that falls under insurance and stuff.
You're thinking of better examples of claims than I just did. It's hard to think of a claim example for a photographer just because you don't really see too many of them, knock on wood, but that's a great example. I mean, anytime you not performing your job the way that you agreed to perform it in the contract ends up costing somebody else money, you can get sued for that. So that was a great example.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of would that fall under the professional insurance on that one? That falls under that
Professional liability, you always have to fill out applications. And a lot of times, not so much for what you do, but there's a lot of professional liability not otherwise classified. So it's really important on those applications to actually fill them out and write in the application all the different services that you provide, because a lot of times the application becomes part of the policy. The whole there's so many different things. That consulting's a big one.
Okay.
Consultants have popped up more and more, and they don't have a specific class for every different type of consultant. So you really want to be forthcoming about what you're actually doing so the insurance company has it in writing and agrees to insure you based on what you put in writing.
Wow. So yeah, I could imagine with all the different type of consulting, marketing consultant, branding. I mean, you name it. But what about? We talked about photographers, videographers. What about our music creatives, like DJs and musicians and such? Would they get similar type of insurance? Like,
I mean, the general liability. That a lot of times you're going to need the general liability to get gigs. You want to come in and play in our bar, our wedding, whatever, our venue. If it's like a big concert, they're going to want to have professional liability. I have never done insurance for a band or anything like that, so I can't speak incredibly knowledgeably on that. I always try to think of what could go wrong. Not so great in my personal life. My wife gets annoyed by it sometimes, but I'm always thinking what could happen here and then what kind of insurance policy would cover it.
Yeah.
So a band, obviously their equipment, same thing as you. You'd want to insure your equipment. But it depends. If it's a thing that you do on a Friday night to make extra money, I don't know that you need like general liability insurance.
Right.
I honestly don't know the answer to that, but I would definitely want to make sure that that all my equipment's covered for sure.
Okay. So maybe like say like a wedding band or something like that, they would definitely need general liability or.
I would imagine so.
That.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe you get a policy just in the band, you get the band covered, and then that shouldn't be something that's very expensive or probably that hard to get, but I don't have a lot of personal experience with that, on something like that.
Yeah, I know with my dad, like when he was doing sound and everything and all, like his equipment and everything, like if people stole a microphone before you got to pack it up after a gig or something like that, or different things and all, because it's like your equipment could get damaged. Like especially if you're playing at bars and stuff, people have their drinks, they spill it on your monitors and everything. Now that couple $1,000 monitor or whatever it is that you had now is damaged and everything from this beer that just spilled on it and everything and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's a little different based off of the creative, but yeah, there's definitely...
Yeah, their main risk is definitely their equipment. And I don't really, I mean, unless somehow out of their control, people got up on stage and started going wild and got hurt, but you don't really see that.
Yeah.
It's not the places I've gone.
And then they are always traveling too. So that whole thing about if they got an accident on the way and they couldn't perform and stuff like that, and now they're out a gig and everything and all, like any of that kind of stuff would play to them too.
Yeah, I would imagine if you're a professional band, then it's your main occupation. And if your equipment got stolen, I mean, you want to make sure that it gets replaced, because for you might not be able to get your Gibson Black Beauty back, but you can get another guitar to do another gig.
Yeah.
But you can get the value for it.
Right.
So
Okay. And then you mentioned a term earlier. Was it floater on an insurance? Is that just that's for like all type of
I think
travel?
so. A lot of people, a very common type of insurance that most people know about is a personal articles floater. It's how people insure their engagement rings, their wedding rings, stuff like that. It's the same concept with business. It's just referred to as an inland marine policy.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
stuff that you have on you while you're not at home or
Yeah.
at your business premises, in other words.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Because I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, I kind of assumed, but
Yeah.
hey, why don't we just figure out the right answer,
I
right?
always use analogies to personal insurance because people have a better understanding. And I just try to make it as basic as possible because I think a lot of insurance people overcomplicate things. And
Yeah.
I've noticed or I've learned in the past that people don't stop you to ask a question if they don't understand. And then, my big thing is just learn this from another guy who we used to network with. Education before implementation. Like I want people to understand what they're buying from me
Yeah.
before they buy it. I want them to understand where they have coverage, where they may not have coverage, because at the end of the day, it's up to them. As long as you know you're not covered for something and you're prepared, that's fine. But like I said earlier, if you get to the point where you're paying all this money and then you find out when your stuff gets stolen, no coverage, that you never want to be in that situation.
Right. Right. I totally understand that. Now we have also other creatives. Now this is different. We're moving into graphic designers,
Mm-hmm.
writers that have intellectual property, which would lead to more like legal disputes, like copyright
Yep.
and contracts. What kind of insurance protections would you recommend for ones
That's
in
that's
that realm?
definitely another professional liability line. A lot of people think it's you see on personal advertising and injury. It's one of the line items on just about every certificate of insurance, and it's included. It's usually not covered there, so that's a professional. It's a specialty product. It's a professional liability coverage. I mean, if you put something on somebody's website and they pay you to they pay you to do their website, and then you put something on their website that shouldn't be there, and they end up getting sued for having something wrong on their website, you didn't perform your job the right way, and your expertise was not correct. So that's
Ah,
definitely a professional liability product.
for sure. And then we have actors, stage performers that rely. They would obviously get health insurance for their health, but
hmm
would they need a professional liability insurance too, or like
Um,
you have
I think,
anything else
I,
for
I
them?
mean, when you're speaking to the health and being able to actually physically perform the job, so like a lot of times, disability insurance is a big one that a lot of business owners, and I'm assuming probably a lot of creatives don't have. So, like workman's compensation is a big part of what I do that protects people, that protects employees of businesses. Typically, business owners don't include themselves in their workman's comp policy. I always tell the owners, I think your money's better spent on a disability policy because that way, if you tear your hamstring playing softball on the weekend, which a lot of us older guys do, it's a common injury. First softball game of the season, someone always gets hurt. But if you hurt yourself outside of work, the disability policy kicks in and pays you for your injury, whereas workman's compensation only pays for a work injury.
Mm,
So disability is a big one. I mean, if you ever lose the ability to earn income, disability can be huge, and it's something that a lot of people overlook for sure.
okay. And I know you've worked with me and some other creatives. Like, have you ever seen? Do you have like any examples of like a creative that you've worked with that may have faced some significant loss because of the lack of coverage or not having the right coverage?
Knock on wood, I have not. I typically don't have. I said earlier, it's up to the consumer ultimately if they want to do their insurance. I'll use the word the right way.
Yeah.
Typically, if they don't want to do it, if they want to do something where it's just they don't care, they don't really want to engage, they don't want to take the time, and they want to do it in a manner where if a claim happened, they're not covered. I typically don't take them on as a client.
Yeah.
But I'll refer them to somebody else, and I'll tell them if the only thing that you care about is getting your certificate, there's lots of online companies. It'll be less expensive. Typically, they don't see the value in what I do, so I try to only work with people who see the value. And because of that, when people have claims, they're typically covered.
Now, with you being a broker,
Mhm.
what separates you from the online companies? Do you have like the access to the different plans and such that they would do, or
Well, the number one thing that separates a broker or an agent, who, for the people listening that might not know the difference, an agent just works for and represents one carrier, like a State Farm or an Allstate. Their agents, brokers work for a brokerage, and they have appointments to sell lots of different insurance companies. Um, but the biggest difference is you're working with an expert who's going to, in theory, recommend the right coverages, where when you're doing it online, there's no expert there. So you're kind of just like piecing it together by following whatever their website tells you to do. It doesn't tell you if you did it right, doesn't tell you you might want to think about this or that. So I mean, that's just doing it without an expert is kind of risky in my opinion. I mean, I rely on people who are good at what they do for everything. That's one of the best things about being in networking so long.
Yeah.
I have a guy or a girl for everything. I don't ask about the price. I don't expect it to be the cheapest price. I expect it to be fair, and I expect them to do a good job. So I think that's all people can really ask for with insurance too. It's like the cheapest policy you can find will usually end up costing you the most in the long run. I tell people that all the time. So if you just want the cheapest thing, there's plenty of online companies, but just know what you're giving up by doing that.
We have so much technology now, and what about technology insurances? Like, say for instance, a photographer had files, but then I don't know, the hard drive crashed. Are there any insurances that you have that you know of that protect?
Well, so the big thing with technology, I guess, that's like a hot button issue is cyber insurance. So cyber claims are on the rise. I think part of that is because more businesses have insurance. So there's actually a way to put claims in, because before businesses had cyber insurance, there was no claim because they didn't have coverage. They just paid out of pocket. But like the phishing things you hear about all the time, I
Yeah.
mean, these emails, it looks so legitimate. I mean, so that's the biggest thing on the tech side is cyber is blowing up because it's just such a risk. I mean, it's not only these huge companies like Target. They were in the news last year for having a big cyber breach. So the thing with cyber is if, let's say you had a big portfolio full of all of your customers that you've ever done photography for, all of their personal information, like socials, birth dates, credit card numbers, things like that. And then let's say your iPad or whatever you store that on gets stolen. Not only are you out money because the theft, but if they get all your customers' personal information and do something with their personal information, you're now on the hook for all of the losses because you're the source of the breach, right?
Yeah.
So cyber insurance, a lot of people think of cyber insurance like it protects me if I'm hacked. But as a business owner, it protects your reputation because it's up to you to make all these people whole again. So that's called third-party cyber, protecting the people who you have their personal information. But I would say as far as tech goes, cyber is by far the biggest hot button issue right now. A lot of businesses, even contracting businesses, keep a lot of personal information in their CRMs and in their whatever job or stuff like that. They have a lot of stuff that they're housing, and they often don't have the right or enough like two-factor authentication and things like that on their phones and their computers. So when it comes to tech, cyber is definitely the biggest one right now.
Yeah, but that's good to know. We have all the tech, AI and stuff, but the cyber hacking, like you said, the phishing and stuff is crazy on the rise. I mean, even today, like I had somebody call in and tried to say like, "Hi, we're from voice recognition," trying to talk about like the Alexa or the Googles, and it's like, "Oh, we don't have your information to make sure you're properly in the system," and I just hung up on them because I was just like, "Okay." No.
So they're getting good to the point where I know two people who got calls from legitimate, I won't name the bank, a big bank everybody knows. It's an incoming number. It's actually their number, shows up on the caller ID that way. They're told fraudulent claim or fraudulent charges they're worried about. We're going to read you this code. We're going to stop it. The minute you give them their code, they're right into your bank account. One guy lost over $25,000, can't get it back. I mean, it's crazy how elaborate these schemes are getting.
Sheesh.
I mean, there's businesses that are sending out, it's not really from them, but they're sending out invoices to their clients, and it's from their email. It's got everything looks legit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just like
that almost makes sense because we use QuickBooks and stuff like that. And in QuickBooks, like at the bottom of the emails, what I see in the templates that go out to our clients when we're sending it, it tells our clients like if this looks like fake or something is wrong with this, contact the provider that's coming from and ask them if you have any suspicions about something and everything. And I was always like, well, that's interesting. I'm like, we're sending it out from our QuickBooks and stuff, but it's QuickBooks because of things like that and everything.
It's really good. I mean, like even if they get you to pay a bill for like $1,200, I mean, $1,200 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's not going to make or break most businesses at the end of the year. But if you're doing that to 100 people a month, I mean, it's not, that's what I meant. It's not always like Walmart and these $1 million cyber breaches. A lot of it happens to small businesses. And the biggest thing is if you get hit with a good enough like cyber attack, it can put a small business right out of business, number one, and it can just destroy your reputation because now everybody that you ever worked with is like, he's the reason why this happened to me. It's like, you know, you want to, but being able to make all those people whole again, even though the incident stinks, it's nice to be able to help when it happens.
Yeah. Ooh, man, it's just stressful to think about. The such a changing world and everything. You know, it used to be that you'd keep everything on like those paper Rolodex and
Yep.
and everything like that. So someone actually had to break into your facility.
To some degree, it seems like it's even like less of a risk to do it that way anymore with how people can just get into your computers these days.
That's what sometimes I'm like, and that's what I'm like. Sometimes it's better to stick to what we used to do instead of like trying
Sometimes
to change
simple
it.
is better.
Yeah.
But you mentioned AI also. How AI is changing the insurance landscape is they use AI for a lot of things now inside the carriers. For example, every building you try to do insurance for, they get like an AI report. They use satellites. They use all kinds of stuff. Some companies even go as far as breaking down like the demographic of the people in like an apartment. Like they'll say things like it appears as though the average rate, like the median age is XYZ, the median income is this, and it's like, how do they even? I don't even know how they know it. But
Yeah.
I think AI is like, obviously, it's really interesting and it's good, but it's also like not
Scary.
knowing how they're coming up with, not knowing where they're getting the information or how they're getting it is kind of scary.
Yeah. Yeah. AI. I mean, we use AI for like helping us and more like a lot of like back end stuff and whatnot, you know, but if you don't use it, you get left behind. But at the same time, you know, it's like that balance and stuff.
Yeah, it's I think I read something about Apple News like using AI exclusively for a minute there, and they realized that some of these reports were just like completely crazy, like not real. And I'm not a big. You can't take the human element out of everything.
Yeah.
So quickly, in my opinion, especially not insurance.
No, I don't think so too. I forget what insurance company it was. I've heard of insurance companies doing it like where they use the AI to, I guess, like authorize claims or not or whatever, stuff like that. And I think that can be dangerous in a sense where it's like you said, it takes the human element out of it. It just kind of sees a number, this and that, and then
Technology can always be manipulated by the people who control it. Is how I look at it. So checks and balances, I guess, if you're going to use it. Make sure that there's checks and balances with it, I would say.
So what are some other benefits? We talked about insurance and everything else like that. What are some other great benefits of a creative networking with an insurance person?
The biggest benefit so when I network with people, I usually become friends with them. You know, it's not just like go to the meeting and I network and, you know, you become friends with people. Like my big thing is surround yourself with people in areas where you're weak and they're strong, and then everybody can kind of benefit. So I always say like knowing your insurance agent or broker, a good way to look at it is if you have your broker's cell number, that's probably a good thing. If it's just somebody that you call that you have really no relationship with outside of being your insurance person, some people prefer it that way. But for me, I think it's beneficial. Like my customers and my people in my network, they know that I'm always going to tell them the truth. And I always tell people, if 9 agents are telling you this and one's telling you this, the one telling you this is probably the one telling you what you don't want to hear, and you can probably believe that they're giving you the right advice. So I just think like if it's something that you don't understand, which insurance is something that most people don't understand, having somebody that you know and trust a little bit more than just somebody that is just your insurance person, I think there's a lot of value to that. Because when you know, like for me at least, when I know and trust people, like I care. I don't want my name on something. I don't want to be the reason why they have a really bad experience. I want to be the reason why, like if your house burns down or you have like a huge car accident, that you're like, my people call me and say, it happened, it sucked, but I knew that I was covered because I knew you had my back. And like, I take a lot of pride in that. So that's why that's the main value in like networking with people, and like just having a strong relationship with someone that does that is important.
And it's versus having just like, you know, it's just you're a number on from a website person versus when you have a personal relationship, like you
Yeah,
said.
don't get me wrong. Like I have a personal relationship with a lot of people who just like found me somehow or maybe got referred to me that I had no relationship with. But I think the relationship with an insurance person, it's really not that hard to stand out as an insurance person. You have to answer the phone. You have to call people back and return emails when you say that you're going to do it. And you just basically have to do your job. And a lot of insurance people are just so caught up in like sell new, sell new, sell new that they kind of forget about the people that they already sold to. So, I mean, that's the biggest difference. I mean, just and a lot of it has to do with how different agencies and agents get paid. But I mean, I'm very incentivized to keep current customers happy. Let's just put it that way. Like I'm not only chasing new business. Like it's I'm more concerned with the people that I have insured than constantly being out there trying to find the next person to sell something to.
And then Naomi, I mean, you're way more versed than me in insurance. Did we miss anything that that we want to talk about?
Well, we were talking about so a lot of people think of like, okay, I got a policy, I set it up, I'm good to go and stuff. But as companies grow, their needs change and everything and stuff. And even if their needs don't change and stuff, it's policies, correct me if I'm wrong, they probably change a little bit over time maybe too. So it's like how often should they reevaluate their needs and their policies that they have?
That's a great question. So one of the things that I think separates what I do and what we do at our firm is we're big on what we call proactive services. I mean, most business owners have so much going on that they're not thinking to themselves, 90 days until my policy renews. Let me make sure I ask Don about that. So we proactively reach out to a lot of our customers, especially when they're like a business that's a lot of the businesses that I work with are on the uptick. You know, they were younger guys like me when I first started working with them. Now they're like 20 years into it. So I give a lot of business owners things when I know that they're in growth mode. These are like the keys to call. You hire somebody, fire somebody, add a vehicle, add a different operation, or add a different service that you're providing. So you want to always kind of like address that before a renewal if you can. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't call every single person, but you do want to evaluate your insurance every few years. I mean, we're big on markets change, right? So like, let's say company A is great at photographers, and then they took all the photographers and they were less expensive than everybody else. Well, what always ends up happening there is company A gets crushed with a bunch of claims because they're on everything and they were too inexpensive. And now maybe company A isn't the best. I know that. So if I know that, I call you proactively. Hey, you've been with them for a while. There's another product out here. And while we're talking about that, are you still doing XYZ? This is what you were doing last time we looked at it. So it's not something that you don't need to shop your insurance every year. A lot of people think that. And about the shopping is more like you want to shop your insurance at the at the carrier level, not the agent level. So what I mean by that is a lot of business owners just are pre-programmed to say, every 2 years, I'm going to go out and I'm going to tell my broker, and then I'm going to tell 3 other brokers, this is what I want. You guys fight it out. Best price wins. All that really does is create, like we call it, market mayhem. It all ends up back to the same spot. All the underwriters are seeing the same submission coming in from 5 different agents or brokers. And then they think to themselves, which one is the client going to work with? Which one should I take serious? And they end up taking none of them serious. So shopping is good. Reevaluating is good. But if you're working with the right broker, they can do all of that for you. And sure, there might be some time where, you know, a different broker might have a different option. And in that case, it can make sense. But you don't want to just flood the market with the same submission every year from 10 different directions, because all that really does is make the insurance company not take you serious.
Okay. All right. So we talked about general liability.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about professional insurance. We talked a little bit about what a COI is, what it's used for. We talked about cyber security insurance. We talked about the floater, traveling, and everything. A little bit of health. I mean, not too much detail on health insurance, but we just mentioned it and stuff. So anything else that we should mention?
So the hired and non-owned auto is something that's on your policy. And that's a big one because sometimes like businesses they might not own a commercial vehicle, but they might have to rent something to get to and from a gig or something like that. You want to make sure that if you're using a vehicle in the scope of your business, that you have coverage. It's very inexpensive. It's a basic add-on. That's a great example of one of the add-ons we pretty much include without even telling people, oh, it costs an extra $75 a year. It's something that people need, and it's something that people don't think of. They just think like, oh yeah, my car insurance through like whatever company will cover it. Not the case all the time. So that obviously commercial auto when you own a fleet of vehicles is important, especially when they're lettered and owned in the business name. EPL insurance. Have you ever heard of that?
No, what's EPL?
So employment practice liability. It covers a lot of different things. And just think about like today's like landscape, right? So if you fire somebody and they even if they're the worst employee ever, show up late every day, do a terrible job, they're last out of everyone. They deserve to get fired. You can't help it if they turn around and say, well, they fired me because of this or because of that or some reason that's not true, but they'll say. So that's an example of what EPL can cover. It can also, if you're working, if you're working in a restaurant, or let's say you own a restaurant and like waitresses and waiters and then chefs and everybody squeezing by everybody, and it's like, oh, this person touched me, or like they made an inappropriate comment, and those are the types of things that always happened, but they seem to happen more and more these days. So that's another big one that a lot of business owners need but don't have. So if you're working if you're working in people's houses, you know, you don't want to get accused of saying something or making an inappropriate comment and have it come back, because the general liability policy is not going to cover something like that.
True, man. The insurance landscape is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, people sue. This is such a litigious society anymore. People just sue everybody for everything. I don't know the exact stat. You could look it up afterwards, but there's something like an astronomical increase as far as the percentage of active practicing attorneys in the United States from like 1970 to 2000 and then 2000 to now. I mean, it's just, there's so many lawyers and everybody sues everybody for everything anymore. So
yeah,
they keep coming up with new insurance products to cover it. But
oh man, anything else, Naomi, that you're thinking of?
No, I think we covered a lot today and everything on that.
And then one last thing, what advice would you give a creative entrepreneur who knows they need insurance but isn't sure where to start?
If you have a network, which I'm sure a lot of people who are creatives do, just ask for a referral. Talk to 2 or 3 different people and just get a vibe for like, insurance people tend to be very salesy. If you feel like somebody's pushing something on you, to me, that's kind of like a turnoff. I don't like when people do that to me. So it's like, the conversation should be more like questions as opposed to buy this. It should be like, tell me about your business. Like, you want to have an insurance person that's going to take the time to understand your business, specifically things like you're a photographer, but you're probably a lot different than other photographers. Like, how are you different? What are services you provide that they may not? So like you really want your agent to have an in-depth understanding of everything that you do. And if they're not asking those types of questions, to me, that's a red flag. But there's also like a personality component. You know, I'm not everybody's cup of tea just from a personal standpoint. And to me, whenever you're working with somebody, you want to kind of like at least get along with them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, talk to a few, but get a referral. Typically, the referrals, if you're getting a referral based on this guy is cheap, that's not a good thing. So,
yeah.
you like insurance. I always tell people this is the best advice for creatives or for anybody, really. Do not prioritize cheap. Every person out there that's selling something, whether that's insurance or anything else, knows that if their price isn't good, they're not going to get a sale. But if you tell somebody cheap, 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 a lot of people will come out and give you something cheap. Then you'll sign an application, sign off that you acknowledge a million things that you don't know. And then when push comes to shove, no coverage. So when they're leading with price, typically that's not somebody that's full of confidence or really that great at their job.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, Don, how can if people want to learn some more about insurance and reach out to you, how can they reach out?
I give people my cell. It's a blessing and a curse. So cell, email, you can hit me up on LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever's easiest. One of the big things I do is one of the big ways where I've built up a good client base is if you just ever have a question, getting advice from somebody else or another agent or broker, feel free to bounce them off of me. I have no skin in the game. If you ever just have that like second guessing feeling in your brain and you want to ask a question and just get the real answer, I'll always give you the real answer. And like I said earlier, you might not like it. It might not be the answer you want, but it'll be the right answer.
Now, you mentioned too that you're on LinkedIn. So how can they find you on LinkedIn? Like, what's your name on LinkedIn?
Donald Blizzard. No, sorry, just Don Blizzard. I think I'm probably the only Don Blizzard on LinkedIn that sells insurance. So I'm not hard to find. That's another good thing. My name makes me pretty easy to find on pretty much all social platforms.
The
Oh,
Blizzard.
one other thing. So with people reaching out and stuff, do you only work in a certain market, or can you work with people in different states? Like, how does that work with insurance?
No, I'm glad you asked that. So I can work in just about any state. I wouldn't work in certain states like Florida or New York. You're better off working with an agent down there. I have people who I can refer you to down there. So our firm is backed by private equity now. So I typically do most of my work in Pennsylvania just because that's where we are, and there's no shortage of business in Pennsylvania. But we do a lot in Delaware, Jersey, Maryland. If the account's big enough and it makes sense for me and the firm and the customer, I can do it in just about any state or help facilitate it at least. But yeah, tri-state area, and that's pretty. I mean, there's plenty of work here, so there's really no need to go much further than that.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure we get your information in our description so people can reach out to you for any questions, and whether if they want to hire you or just get advice of insurance stuff, they can definitely reach out to you.
Yeah. One more thing, if you don't mind adding, like the big thing, I can confidently tell you that fire, water, mold restoration companies and tree companies, they're the two things that I like to focus on. We have a really, really good product. There's a lot of value that we can add to those to help them manage their insurance program. And I mean, that's, who knows who's listening to this, but that contractors and those two niches specifically are where we really excel.
Nice, man. Well, thank you, Don, so much for being here on the show with us today. That will conclude our episode with the Creative Connectors Corner. I am your host, Tato Datsun, with my co-host, Naomi and Don Blizzard. Thank you all for joining us on 23 Journeys, a network of creative. Make sure you visit us at 23journeyscreatives.com for more information. Have a nice day.
Bye, guys.